This is episode number 2 of our podcast. Welcome everybody and welcome to our guest Antonia. Antonia is a secondary school teacher and a good friend of ours, and we've invited Antonia along to come and chat to us about her experience being a teacher and to talk a little bit about history and the idea about the Black history curriculum, and her experiences with that and opinions with that. And I will let Antonia introduce herself now. So over to you, Antonia.
Hi, I'm very excited, guys, to be doing this. So I'm Antonia. I'm 27 years old this year, and I currently chose to get into the teaching profession. But actually, beforehand, I decided to do philosophy as a degree. So it was really like a pivotal moment when I finally decided that I was going to become a teacher and like have to do that whole adult thing. But yeah, I guess it started when I finished my MA in philosophy and then was like, I have nothing to do. So I went to China and
Why
just
not?
enjoyed exactly.
Yeah.
What are you doing there?
And then I realized that I really connected with the kids and it was a passion that I wanted to take forward. So then I just thought I'd come back, do my PGC in English, and then now I'm in my NQT year. So that's when I've done my PGC, so my year at uni, and now I'm currently in my final year of training at secondary school.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Well done.
My last term, and I'll be fully qualified.
Yes.
Wow.
That's a really good achievement. Well done.
Yeah.
Sounds amazing. Also, I guess that segue of like philosophy into teaching is quite a natural transition in terms of the principles of learning and those sort of things?
Yeah, I guess it's like one of my biggest things was how do you get the kids to start considering life? How do you get them to think about what they are learning and then apply that to every day and the outside world and thinking and like me as an individual being? I think in many respects, like growing up, I didn't fit in to a stereotype in my area. And I kind of wanted to consider what it is to be a human being, what it is to live, what life is, and kind of teach.
Big questions.
Yeah.
Big questions. Oh, amazing. Oh, wow. It sounds like you've been on such a journey to get to this point and kind of you figuring out who you are and then getting to do what you want to do as a career. So do you feel good? Do you feel settled in this career?
I feel positive. You know what? Like every day as a teacher, we'll hear teachers come in, day out, complaining about, oh my God, this student, this, and I'm so guilty of that. However, it's just so rewarding when you finally get through to them, and it's something else when you can just connect with them on a level where you are genuinely changing someone's life. Like they are going to look back and you know that whatever they have learnt that day, for even a second, a minute, you have been part of that process. So yeah, very rewarding.
Yeah,
that's interesting because everyone has that one teacher that they can say, this teacher in such and such, they did this. And I've got several of those teachers. I'm 28 now, and it's like you can sort of look back to kind of 10 years ago and something a teacher said or did really sticks with you, either good for the good or for the bad. And it's funny how, like you say, those kind of small pockets of moments, they do stick with you for the rest of your life. And I guess it's quite a nice segue into kind of the importance of teaching in schools and representation, and actually how we teach our kids and what we teach our kids has a big impact on how they see the world. And I remember we spoke about it briefly about a couple of weeks ago, and you mentioned how like the curriculum, how it was designed, was kind of the way the curriculum design wasn't set up to support people of colour or kids from minor ethnic groups or Asian groups. Do you mind kind of explaining that?
Yeah, so anybody that has gone to uni to become a teacher, so not the So there are loads of different avenues you can go into to become a teacher. There's the uni route, there's the teach first route, and then there's the direct training. So I went through the uni route, which is more like learning about the pedagogy and then applying it. And my uni set up this question. So before we even entered a classroom, our mentor set up this question for us on the board that we then discussed as adults. Who are the students and what do they know? And it was this whole idea that you are really, really using the students' experiences as the center of your teaching practice. So what is it that the students can bring into your classroom that you can then use to utilize to then branch off and teach them about a subject? And I had 2 placements in my first school. And the curriculum itself, I was finding when I was taking this question, who are the students and what do they know? And I was applying it to my teaching and even my lesson plans and like my resources that I was doing. So my PowerPoints, I was like, it's not working. It's not fitting. None of my students can connect with the themes and issues that are present in the texts. And we can get onto it more when we look at Key Stage 4, so GCSE text, which is arguably the most important part of, a student's career. But it was really difficult for me to engage them because they couldn't bring their experiences into the classroom. And you see that before a student even comes into a school, when they're in year 6, the system sets them up. So on the register, there's a column on the register that counts as EAL. Now, EAL stands for basically a student that English isn't their first language, or their parents have moved over to the UK. And I mean, as a child, I was an EAL student. Both of my parents are born here, but English wasn't my first language because obviously my grandparents raised me along with my parents, and Greek was a big part of, my everyday life. So grammatically, sentences, weren't grammatically correct, and they weren't the kind of English standard that the schools expected. So I would come under that EAL category. And a lot of schools, they use this data to then inform them on the students and the students' potential progress. Now, this impacts, obviously it should impact the curriculum and what we teach them, because we should consider, okay, so the students come from diverse backgrounds. What text are we going to teach them, first of all, and how does that apply to them so that they can, utilize the text and extract information and gain something from it, to then prepare them for GCSE. But we don't necessarily find that in all cases, and in my first 2 placements I didn't find that at all. It was very much, this is what it is, this is a standard text that we're going to look at, and the students have to then they have to basically either get on with it and learn something, or unfortunately you're just going to fall behind, and that's it.
And Antonia, at the school that you're at the moment, what portion of the kids at the school would you say fall into that EAL kind of category?
So we have I think it's over 60% of our students are from Black African Caribbean families. Yeah.
Oh, sorry. I was going to carry on. I was just going to say that, I mean, thinking about what you were saying there, whereby it's like, okay, you conform and you try and fit in, or you're kind of left to get on
and you kind of
with what's going on as normal at school. And so to me, I would think, oh, okay, so that must be a really small kind of proportion of the kids at each school that fall into those categories, but then to hear that it's actually the majority of people who go to that school who are from, you know, who might not have English as their first language, or they might be, you know, from different countries. That's so shocking. And especially as this data is being taken, so it's like, well, what is being done with this data? Do you know what is being done with it?
So I mean, schools generally are very much, everybody, I feel like even myself, before I got into the teaching profession, you would just see a teacher as someone that conducts a lesson, is there for an hour with the pupils per day, and then leaves and just has the rest of the afternoon off, really. Just like get on with it. Summer holiday, life is bliss.
I think we would be teachers if that was the case.
Yeah. But it's like the harsh reality of it, it's not like that at all. There are a hell of a lot of tick boxes that a teacher needs to fill. And if anything, the teaching is the most minute part of it. At the end of the day, teachers, their one goal is to get pupils to attain a specific grade. And it looks good on the school, and it looks good on the borough, and then the government and statistics and blah, 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 blah. And you all need, all of these tick boxes just go back to, you know, the government needing data and evidence to prove that they're doing X, Y, and Z. So, I mean, when it comes down to how far we as teachers use this data, I actually am guilty of not using it at all. I don't judge my students at all. As far as I'm concerned, it's a sheet of paper, even down to grades. I don't look at it, and I don't judge that they got an A in their SATs, and that's how they're going to be. They're going to have A's until year 10 or 11 when they sit their GCSE. I just don't, because, you know, they might have had a really good day and got an A. It's not a reflection of them as a human being. In terms of the school, though, I'm actually very fortunate where I'm at the moment, because I feel like they do a lot to bridge the gap between what the government views as a tick box and who their students are and what reflects our students. So, for example, I mean, today we had training on, so we've had training after the Black Lives Matter protests last year. It deeply affected a lot of our students. And I was at our school when Black Lives Matter protests were happening. I after I was there for training, and our school's very good at listening to the pupils and acknowledging what the pupils' viewpoints are, and then either looking into what the students are trying to say to then educate them on that, or trying to understand, you know, the emotions that they have about a certain topic, to tackle it with sensitivity and understanding, which is a part of our profession, is we're there to, you know, understand, listen. Teachers not about talking, it's about listening and then responding. And so I've gone off topic now. I can't even.
No, you're fine. I think what I was going to ask, one question was a case of like, you mentioned obviously the protest happened last year. Regards to kind of what happened with George Floyd and the subsequent protests. I think I was going to say, kind of, how did it affect you, I guess, personally as a person, and then I guess you as a teacher? Did that change? Also, I know you just going into that school. Did it change your mindset going into that school and kind of seeing what was going on, both personally and what you do in your profession?
So when I remember first seeing that, I woke up in the morning and I've opened my phone and it was on the news, and I remember thinking, this is really, really, really sad. That's the first thing that came into my mind was, this is really, really sad and upsetting. And I think, in all honesty, I just couldn't understand why there is still so much discrimination. And I think because I couldn't understand, because I would never intentionally be racist or hurt someone because of their race, gender, sexuality. You know, I would never do that myself. I just couldn't understand why someone else would do it. So in all honesty, I was a bit confused, because I was like, how can that still be happening in today's day and age? And that was my own ignorance, because I feel like when I just got myself into a bit of a bubble, and I only looked at the way that I treat people and not how the world treats individuals. And I think for me, it was just kind of a wake-up call that what is going on right now? You need to be a person that is going to try as best as they can to educate and represent what stands for right, and try and improve yourself not only as a person, but use your voice to improve the thoughts and opinions of others. So when I went into the school, I was I tried to be as understanding as possible and to listen. I think that's one of the key things for me as a teacher, is that I never prejudge. I never shut down on people. I always listen to them. Even if it's something I don't believe in myself, I will never shut them down. I will always listen to them, and then play devil's advocate with them and try and get the response that I want to get, because there's no point in shutting people down. You have to try, if it's not something right, or you don't believe it's right, you've got to try and do it get to them in another way that is actually going to make them understand. So yeah, when I went to school, that was my response. I listened and had conversations with my pupils.
And what were some of the things that those pupils were saying to you? What were the things that they wanted to change or to experience throughout school?
Talk about, yeah. Now, what did they say?
Okay, so I think one of my hardest conversations that I had was in my year 9 class, and we were talking about the Black Lives Matter protests, and one of the boys at the front of my class said, "Oh, I don't even get what that's about. I don't understand. Why is it that there's white privilege and there isn't such thing as black privilege? We, at the moment, the Black Lives Matter protest isn't that black privilege." And I remember, I honestly, I stood there in shock, and I was like, how do I even begin to tackle this question?
Can I ask you, was it a black people or white people who said this?
A white boy.
Okay, yeah. I think just for context of the story, and just so I kind of knew, yeah, okay, that makes sense, yeah.
So what happened then?
Yeah.
So I didn't know how to respond. Like, in all honesty, I did not know how to respond. This was my first term teaching at this school. I barely knew all the kids. Like, oh my gosh. And I said, okay, right, let's pause the lesson right now. So we completely forgot all the slides that I'd prepared the night before, put that to the side. And I was like, let's have a discussion about this issue right here. Who else in the class can offer a answer to the question that this young man has here? And then all of the boys just suddenly, they just all became adults. They shifted from this immature kind of childishness that sometimes there is in the classroom in a school. And it all became super mature. They put their hands up and they were speaking with articulation to one another, and it was just bouncing to and fro. And they were able to conduct, I actually didn't have to say anything. They were conducting this debate and conversation amongst themselves. And it was actually such a lovely thing to see, way than a nice and sophisticated way, their opinions, their point of views amongst one another without a teacher's intervention. They were facilitating their own conversation. And in the end, this young man changed his perspective, but it wasn't because of me. It was because of them and the knowledge that they brought into the classroom based on their own personal experiences. I could never have spoken from the perspective of my young students that come from backgrounds that have been deeply affected by what happened last year. I couldn't, because of my particular background and upbringing. And it was lovely to just see that conversation flow naturally between them, without supervision, obviously.
And how was that kind of I suppose the atmosphere in the air and I suppose the relationships between everyone in the class following that? Because it sounds like there are a lot of unspoken things going on before everyone had that conversation. And I don't know if maybe, people were kind of stuck in their groups that they were hanging out with, but did you see any differences after that conversation? Were people chatting to others that they don't usually chat to? Like, what happened after that?
So within the classroom, I have a seating plan, so they're not sat with friends anyway. So yeah, way away from them, they're not talking.
Yeah, fair enough.
But I didn't notice that anything changed. I think it was, so the conversation started because we were talking about the main character Crooks in Of Mice and Men, and we were talking about discrimination in America, 1920s America. And then we were contextualizing that, and obviously the protest that was so fresh came into the boys' minds. And from what I remember, they stood very firm in their beliefs. I don't agree with you, because, and then they said their own perspective, and from it, there was no tension after. Initially, there was a lot of tension, and hands went straight up like, no, what is he saying? Can I answer this? What is he saying? And it was just about, let's all calm down. Let's answer him. Let's leave this to the side. I think as well, like the fact that I said to them that this was such an important topic that we were actually going to leave the lesson now. We're not going to focus on Of Mice and Men. We're going to talk about this right now, because this is an issue. So we can talk about it. You need to articulate your point, though. So we need to have hands up. We need to remain calm so we can actually speak and hear each other and respond to each other. It flowed quite nicely, and they realized that there was a lot of severity in the discussion that we were having, because I'd pushed what we were learning to the side. So there was no, the conversation, the kind of debate that was happening, it concluded. They were able to talk about it, discuss it, and this young man, I can't say names, but this young man, he completely changed his mind by the end, and we moved on. So
that makes me think of two things. Two things come to mind. Firstly, of what a great example that was to think about, because when you think about how structured the schooling system is, and the system is so structured that there is no room for anything else to change that, to change the curriculum. And it just makes me think about how when these young people were given some freedom, some flexibility, how able they were to take that opportunity and to use it and to have those conversations. Yeah. And secondly, it makes me think about people of my age, so I'm now 30, I'm getting on, but people of my age who I have conversations with, and I try to, well, as a group, we try and talk about difficult issues like race and discrimination and, equality. It's so tricky. We all find it so hard to talk about. And it sounds like this just really shows that being able to have these conversations when you're younger, when you're more confident, you're more brave, you want to get your opinion out there, and maybe you care a little bit less about what other people think. Massive overgeneralization, but I'm just thinking a group of boys, they want to have that argument, have a debate. That just shows how useful that space could be within the schooling environment to have those conversations. And especially for someone like me, if I'd have had a conversation like that at school, my perspectives would have changed. I would have been able to take this can't get my words out, perspective of someone else and start challenging my own biases and thoughts. So I think that was a lovely example to think about how useful those sorts of conversations are at school.
Also to add to that, I think credit to you, because
massive.
That's amazing. I think you're the sort of person that schools need, because I can think of several cases where that sort of conversation has been nipped in the bud and then made really awkward. And I think for you to do that, one recognise actually, you don't know the answers to this. It's not necessarily your space to speak on behalf of, young black boys and girls who are experiencing some very difficult things at that moment in time, but to give them space to articulate that, I think one's amazing. I think so credit to you. I think that's amazing. I think people can learn from that, not only in a school environment, but in a work environment, or if they're with their friends, because if you don't talk about it, then it becomes an issue. So I think I just want to give you credit, because that's amazing.
Kudos.
I think.
So Antonia, hearing what you were just saying there, I was thinking, is your approach to your kids, is that something that's encouraged on your course, your uni course at the moment? As into, if a difficult conversation comes up, or a spontaneous conversation comes up with the kids that could be really useful, is it encouraged in your course to take a more flexible approach and maybe stop teaching and open up the dialogue? Or is that something that is, you would say, important to you, like personally, but you see a different approach with the other teachers that you work with?
I have noticed that a lot of the people that I've observed, like a lot of teachers, they won't necessarily stop and talk about important issues. Now, my university thought it was really, really important that we do take a moment and just understand the meaning of what the students are saying. So it was kind of like the opposite. Instead of us analysing like text, we're actually analysing what the students have to say to apply to text. But it's really, really important to understand where your students are coming from. And it goes back to that question that I was talking about before, like, who are the students and what do they know? Like, all these texts that we have for GCSE, war poetry, so war and conflict poetry, and Inspector Calls, Macbeth, all these would be categorized as part of the canon, so part of British texts. But like, what does it mean to be British? So then we go right back and analyze what it actually means to be British. And in all honesty, like, what does it mean? It's
no one knows.
What does it mean? In terms of what the government think it would mean, it's a high upper class white male that dictates, how society should be run. And this is not a reflection of our society. Our society is diverse. It's wonderful. It incorporates lots and lots of cultures, heritages, belief. It's endless possibilities of different interpretations and minds. And so going back to the reflection of what the students know and how we can incorporate that into texts, the government is actually asking the students to learn something that is far removed from their experiences. can learn to recite what they're meant to know for an exam, but actually finding themselves within the text seems virtually impossible.
Yeah.
And I think the job of the teacher is to facilitate a lesson where they can like pick out key bits that the students can find themselves in. But again, like in terms of grades and marking, you want your students to get the best grades. So you're going to teach them what they have to know in order to get those grades. And unfortunately, those texts are moving towards understanding this notion of Britishness. And by that, I mean what the government wants as, you know, a British kind of ideology is that of an upper class male, white male. So it's very far removed, but yeah.
I mean, me as a white middle class female, I'm not interested in any of that stuff. Like, I remember not enjoying like my history classes in school. Like, I didn't have a clue. I didn't want to learn about trains and stuff. So, like, if me being remotely similar to that, like, imagine, like, I don't know,
Imagine
Ken's
me.
experience. Yeah, how was that?
100%. So the classic example was me at A-level history when the first year we did the American Civil Rights Movement, and I absolutely loved it because for the first time, something that I kind of cared about. You know, and obviously I could draw the similarities between America and Britain. Obviously they're quite different, but I could draw on it. And then second year we learned about British politics in the 18th century and learned about the czars. And I was like, and that second year I pretty much fluffed. I mean, I passed, but I didn't do any work because I just didn't care. Because I don't care about the 1800s, 18th century Britain and whether you could vote if you had a pot in your house or X, Y, Z. I didn't really care about Russian history because it didn't relate to me. It had nothing to do with my life. So, you know, like you mentioned, that thing of it being relevant to the kids in school and how does it play to them? If it's relatable, they'll engage with it. If it's stuff that isn't relevant, then
I mean, the thing is, like, thinking back to my school, I was at a majority white school, and a lot of, you know, I would say majority males as well, you know, and I remember a lot of them kind of saying this is so boring. Like, I don't remember anyone really enjoying history. So, but yeah, that's just one stereotype, isn't it? But so I guess now thinking about where we're at the moment and, you know, following Black Lives Matter, the protests, you know, what was going on with that, and thinking about the curriculum, I guess I'll ask the question, Antonia, have you seen any changes at schools since the Black Lives Matter protests, the George Floyd murder? Yeah, what have you seen at school?
In terms of the pupils or the curriculum?
I guess
I guess it's a broad question to kind of take as you like, really.
Yeah, so in terms of the school, I feel like the school have made a real conscious effort to reach out to the students and first of all gauge what they want changing in the curriculum. And one of the things that a lot of our students said is that we want to see Black lives that are celebrated. So you have Black History Month, but that is about specific instances of Black history that normally links to slavery or the oppression of Black people and the freedom. And what our students wanted to see is how can we congratulate and celebrate Black lives? What have they done in Britain? And what of how, you know, we live today in a diverse society? And, you know, I want to celebrate, you know, my heritage, my cultures, my beliefs. So what we did is, so unlike Key Stage 4, so Key Stage 4 being GCSE, the Key Stage 3 curriculum, and we mixed it up a bit. So I was part of creating a new scheme of work where the Year 8s would look at the Windrush generation and celebrating the fact that, you know, people came from the Caribbean to support the war effort, to support the NHS. Without, you know, those people, we would not have the NHS and some of the healthcare expertise that we have at the moment. So it's all to people that moved over from the Caribbean, from the West Indies, to contribute towards that success. And it's something that our students really thrived in. A lot of it as well. Actually, it was really nice to hear some of the students' experiences, because they still had grandparents that came over from the Windrush generation. So it was really nice to hear their experiences. So yeah, it was really, really nice. And it was something that the students really engaged with very well and were successful in the data when they got their grades as well, like really, really good grades.
Oh,
So
there you go.
Yeah.
It's worth it, isn't it?
I think that's like that classic example of like live learning, because that's something that's happening. That happened. It happened kind of in the 60s, but the effects of that is still relevant to today. And the kids will see this stuff in the news, whether their parents are talking about or seeing it on the TV and stuff. And kids from not only black kids or Asian kids or white kids, they will all see it, and they'll have a conversation and be aware of actually the significance of what happened. And maybe adults and things, when they have the chance to make a difference, they can actually make that right decision or make the right choice. So it's great to see actually having that lived experience and seeing like current events being taught and how it matters to the way we live in. Because everyone loves the NHS, but everyone wants to forget how the NHS came to be in the first place. So I think, it's just great to see. I think it's amazing that your school's done that. And I wish that obviously my school that I've gone to and other schools can kind of follow suit.
Hopefully it's a sign of
things to come.
Change, though. Hopefully, and especially with the grades, when you take it back to everyone wants to see those good grades within the system. If they can bang out enough of those grades, then hopefully that will go towards a change. But yeah, so we've got 2 questions left. So the first question was just thinking about yourself, Antonia, personally, but also thinking as yourself as a teacher. How would you like things to change within the curriculum and at school?
If you were Gavin Williamson, you could change the curriculum.
How would I like things to change? I would like more teachers to listen to the pupils like me. And actually, so today was inset day, and I had training. And one quote that really stood out to me, and I thought I'd say it here. So one of the things that was brought up in training was training on trauma, so different kind of traumas that affect the learning within a classroom. Now, a classroom is a place where I've said, previously, debate is meant to happen, conversation is meant to happen, but it's meant to be a safe space where all of those things happen. And without that safe space, the kids won't open up. I heard this and it really changed the way I thought slightly. So the quote is by someone called Ken Hardy, and he says, racial oppression is a traumatic form of interpersonal violence which can lacerate the spirit, scar the skull, and puncture the psyche. And that stood out to me because I'd never considered, or I'd not considered as much as I have today, the effects of the trauma that students have had before entering the classroom. It was a presupposition that I would think they'd come into my classroom, they'd see Miss Christophe, and they'd think, oh, we can all open up a debate and have a lovely conversation, I'd always thought that was a given because I created this safe enough space. But the kind of trauma from their experiences, whether that be from the murder of George Floyd last year, or, the continuing atrocities because of racial discrimination that are happening from the media, their own personal experiences, that all has effect on their learning and their confidence as students when they enter my classroom. So I think in terms of me and my pedagogy moving forward, I really will take into account my students in terms of not only their positive experiences, but also their traumatic experiences, and trying to understand how to make them confident enough or battle that trauma that they have, not battle it, but kind of soothe the trauma that they have, to make them comfortable to open up in my classroom. Yeah.
Lovely. That is, yeah.
Antonia,
I think, yeah, you're what every kid wants in a teacher, I think.
100%.
Yeah,
We need more views.
definitely. Yeah. All right. Well, I'll let Ken ask the last question, because I realise I've done a bit of talking today. So go for it with the last one.
So I guess obviously there's also a lot of schools and things. I also want to kind of say, what can parents do to help support change in schools, and also kind of
everyone as well. You know, what we do to lead that change as well. Sorry, I wanted to open it. Parents first.
Cool.
Sorry, guys.
What can parents do? I think parents can definitely read the text that their kids are reading and ask probing questions. For example, I've said before that an inspector calls at the face of it seems like a very male-centric kind of white British text. However, by opening up a conversation or knowing the text as a parent, you are able to then apply it to modern day context. So what does it mean to be in our society? What is the societal divides that we see present? How does this link to you as an individual? And just having those natural conversations. And I think that way you can find yourself in the text, as opposed to the text kind of ringing home as you're reading it. You kind of can impart some of your experiences in the text just through those natural conversations, not by analyzing it, not by trying to deliberately find meaning in it, but just by having a conversation on the thematic elements of social justice, class system, gender equality, racial divide, things like that.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oof. And I guess I'm thinking about kind of schools that aren't necessarily as willing to be inclusive and open their minds up. Is there anything parents can do to affect change in the curriculum? Whether that be, kind of engaging with the school or the teacher, with the head teachers, anything like that. Is there anything teachers can do to have that impact? Parents can do to have that impact.
Do you know, social media is a very powerful thing. Social media is that platform. No one likes to see, bad press, and not necessarily bad press. You don't have to do it in a negative way so much, but if it's out there on social media, it's not only going out there to the headmaster or the headmistress, it's also the government bodies, the borough, the unions, and then it goes up and up and up. And before you know it, your voice is being heard, parents are clicking like, you're getting support, you're getting a network, and it's all about that, really. It's about getting a network together to support one parent's voice. One parent's voice is probably someone else's thoughts, or if not a group of people's thoughts. So just creating that network, and
that sounds brilliant.
Thank you.
Amazing. Thanks so much, Antonia, for joining us today.
Guys,
before we finish, have you got anything else that you think is important to share, or you want to ask us any questions?
I'd just say that my last word is to everyone's teachers, right? Everyone has the ability to voice their opinion with articulation. Everybody has the ability to teach or impart their knowledge and experiences. So just keep on doing what you guys are doing, and everybody should be doing it.
What a good way to finish. Thank you so much.
Oh, thanks, guys. Really nice talking to you.
Absolute pleasure. Glad we can get you on.